Hi, and welcome to the MedTalks Webinar Series, where you can learn from entrepreneurs, industry experts, and healthcare professionals who are all driving for progress in healthcare. I'm Andrew Adabie, and in this episode, we're joined by our guest, Dr. Leanne Armitage. Dr. Armitage is a dedicated medical doctor, a social entrepreneur, an advocate for health equity. She actually co-founded the Armitage Foundation, aiming to increase the diversity within UK medical schools by supporting students from underrepresented backgrounds. In January 2022, she joined the Board of Trustees at the Anthony Nolan Trust, a charity focused on saving the lives of people with blood cancer and blood disorders. Her impactful work has earned her recognition, including the Queen's Young Leaders Award in 2018. She's pretty amazing. Let's have a chat with her. Leanne, thank you very much for joining me today on Med Talks. I'm really looking forward to the next 20 minutes or so. And I've been looking into you and you're extremely inspiring. But what I'm keen to find out from you is what and who inspired you in terms of your pathway?
Well, firstly, I just want to say thank you for having me here, Andrew. It's always a pleasure for me to join platforms like this and to share my journey. Who inspired me? Can I only give one person?
Of
Can
course, go for it.
I give more than one or only
Of
one?
course you can.
Okay, fine. I think I'd say probably there are three individuals or key influences in my life that have inspired me. I'd say my older sister, because she always saw greatness inside of me and she would always empower me and tell me that you can, always speaking words of positivity. And as a young person who was struggling at times to really have confidence, to know that my dreams were possible, having someone older who can speak with that strong conviction into your life was very empowering for me. I'd say Jesus is one of my biggest inspirations. I came to faith when I was 15 years old, and I was coming from a very underrepresented background. There weren't many people living on my council estate who had dreams like I did, and I had a lot of insecurity. And coming to faith, coming to know Jesus, that gave me a revelation of who I am. It helped me to understand that, there's a plan that God has for my life. There's greatness inside of me, and my background or various other kind of factors that society might try to use to discourage you. I didn't have to be discouraged by that. I was who God says I am. So that was really empowering. And also the late Dr. Miles Monroe. He is incredible. I listened to so many of his teachings, and again, it just empowered me and it helped me to believe that my dreams are possible. And I
Mm.
say that so much because life is about self-belief. You can only manifest the fullness of what is inside of you if you believe you can do it, because you're the person who has to show up to interviews, you're the person who has to apply yourself and put in the work.
Mm.
Which is why you'll see that throughout my story I speak a lot on mindset and self-belief and self-empowerment.
Tell me more about Mars Monroe.
Yeah. So Miles Monroe, he came from the Bahamas, which is
Okay.
a small island in the Caribbean. It's a very expensive island, but nonetheless, he was living in like the poorest area called Bainstown. I actually went to the Bahamas in 2023, last
Nice.
year, and I got to drive past his home and go to his church, which was amazing. But anyway, he came from a very poor family. I think he had about 10 siblings, and um he was growing up in poverty, overcrowded environment, etc. His teacher at school once called him a monkey and basically said that you'll amount to nothing. So he was coming from a very, very, very humble background. And he came to know Jesus and found God in, I think, his early teenage years. And when he also started to receive the revelation about who he was in God's eyes and not who he is based on his environment or how society are judging him, he started to have that self-empowerment and his grades improved. Cut a longer story short, he basically just became an amazing young person, went on to become an amazing speaker, was speaking on a global stage, was involved in government in the Bahamas, politics on an international level. He had a real mandate for trying to empower developing countries to develop as leaders and to operate on the global scale. So he's amazing. Check him out.
I will do. Fantastic. And listening to you and the inspiration you give me, it's fantastic to hear. But clearly, what you've done has been recognized by others, and no one other but but our late Queen. So talk to me about the journey up until that point when you got the leadership award.
Wow. That sometimes when I reflect on that, it still feels so surreal because you
Mm,
can't plan a series of events like that. It just happened. But obviously there is a backstory which I'll share with you.
sure.
So I've kind of alluded to the fact that I was coming from a very underrepresented background. At the age of 15, I decided that I wanted to be a doctor, specifically a trauma surgeon, because I witnessed the aftermath of a stabbing. I grew up in Southeast London between Camberwell and Peckham, which at the time wasn't the cool place to live. And
It is
sadly,
now.
now, exactly. Sadly, you'd hear these stories of young men taking each other's lives through gunshots and stab wounds, etc. So anyway, I witnessed the aftermath of this event, and it wasn't the first time that I had been aware that something like this had happened. But I remember this particular incident. I could hear a helicopter landing, and I love helicopters. I was with my sister, and I said, "We need to go and watch this helicopter land." And she agreed, and we walked over to the scene. And when I arrived there were a crowd of people gathered, and everybody was just standing and staring with blank faces. And I knew at that time that something wasn't right. So I asked the closest lady in the crowd. She told me that a young man had been stabbed. And
Mm.
I remember feeling so many different emotions, but above all, it was that transition of going from a point of feeling completely elated at the prospect of a helicopter landing to then feeling a sense of distraught as you realize that, oh my goodness, it's not landed for any good reason at all, but because a young man has potentially lost his life. And in that moment, I felt a sense of anger. I was looking around thinking everyone's just staring, but who's going to do something to make a difference? And then I felt a sense of disempowerment because I thought, well, what can I do? I'm just a 15-year-old girl.
Mm.
So that evening, I went home with a heavy heart. And I remember just praying and meditating and asking God, what can I do to make a difference? And then the idea came to me that if I aspired to become a trauma surgeon, that would give me a platform to make a difference. So that was why I decided I wanted to be a doctor. I was coming from a very underrepresented background. My mother left secondary school with no qualifications. Only one of my siblings went to university. There weren't any doctors in our social network, etc. So I didn't have as much support as somebody else might. So I did a Google search, realized the first thing I needed to do was get good grades, followed those steps, cut a longer story short, eventually got into medical school. While I was at medical school, thank you, realized there's a massive lack of
Mm.
diversity. And I remember just thinking, wow, there could be the world's future best hematologist or oncologist in an underrepresented environment. And just because they are lacking access to resources and mentors, that talent is being missed. And I'd say I've got quite an activist type of spirit where I want to make a change or do something, not just discuss a problem. So I decided to set up a medical outreach program, which at the time was just a little program in my old secondary school sixth form. And then eventually my university gave me funding to expand that into 3 schools. And around about that time, somebody tagged me on a post on Facebook mentioning the Queen's Young Leaders Program, which was a program that ran from 2014 to 2018. And it selected 2 leaders from each of the countries across the Commonwealth, 2 young leaders. And they suggested I apply for it. So I applied, thinking this is a really cool opportunity, but also thinking I don't know if I would get it. And to my surprise, I was selected, and that is how I had the opportunity to meet the late Her Majesty the
I
Queen.
didn't realize that only 2 people across the whole Commonwealth were selected for that.
From each of the countries in the Commonwealth.
Each of the countries. That's
Yeah,
absolutely amazing.
thank
Um,
you.
now, f- fast forward to your foundation, and just looking back, just retrospectively for a second, what do you think the impact of your foundation has been in the time period it's been operating?
Yeah. It's actually quite difficult to measure impact because
Mm,
impact in that we've impacted over 100 young people,
amazing.
impact in that it's impacted my life and the life of the ambassadors who've participated in the program. And then you have impact in terms of all of the time the story's been shared or the initiatives being shared and people draw inspiration or people want to set up their own initiatives or do similar things. So I'd say that the impact is probably more than what I could knowingly measure. But in terms of young people, we've impacted about 100 young people. It's been a bit challenging tracking their impact in terms of being able for GDPR and other reasons to keep students' details to see if they then go on to university. But certainly some students have reached out to me on Instagram to tell me that they're now studying medicine, or another young person I know is has finished and is working as a midwife. So yeah, it has been impactful, and it's been a wonderful journey, and just hearing back from people afterwards as well.
And I'm sure that even though you can measure only 100 so far, actually the impact is probably tenfold because that individual will inspire people around them, the
Yeah,
families around them. They
absolutely.
will become a role model for the next
Yeah.
10 people. So actually, it's probably far more than that. So amazing work there. And when I was also looking into your background, it's absolutely amazing to see that you're actually on the board of Anthony Nolan. And when I look
Yeah.
at other boards of trustees, normally it's people who are at the pinnacle or at the end of the career or
Yeah.
retired. Actually, it's great that Anthony Nolan reached out to you. Talk to us about that story.
Yeah, so to your point, generally people tend to apply for trustee roles when they're much later in their career, mostly because they just have a lot more experience. But nonetheless, I think it's really important that there's diversity of age on trustee roles, because young people still have valuable stuff that they can offer. In relation to Anthony Nolan specifically, around about the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter time 2020, quite a lot of organizations were looking at the diversity of their boards and their leadership teams. And Anthony Nolan partnered with an agency to help headhunt some people from more diverse backgrounds, namely ethnic minority backgrounds, to join the Board of Trustees. So I was one of the people that was headhunted by the external agency. And then I obviously went through the whole recruitment process with Anthony Nolan, lots of interviews and discussions, etc. And they appointed me to the board. Definitely, they did ask me in the interview actually that you're quite young and you're a junior doctor, you're very busy. Because at the time I was still, I think I was at F2 doctor, so my
Okay.
second year of foundation training. And they said it's not common for someone like you to want to be on a board. Why exactly is it something you want to do? But anyways, going back to the point I initially said, the world's population, more of it is young people. Over 50% is under the age of 30. And it's very important that young people's voices are heard in all sorts of rooms and environments, because even though you might not be able to compete with somebody who's been, I don't know, the partner of Deloitte for 30 years,
Oh,
you
wow.
still have something else you can bring to the table.
And this might be inspiring for others listening to this. Because most people will probably be intimidated just to even apply because they'll think, I need to share a boardroom with those
Yeah,
individuals. You've been through that journey whereby you've walked into that room for the first time and your heart rate has gone up, right? And then, but
yeah.
actually, you've managed to contribute, bring value to that board. So, what is the message to other people of your age who think, actually, do you know what? I would avoid that. I wouldn't apply for it because there's no chance of getting it whatsoever. So,
Yeah.
what would your message be to those individuals?
I think my message would be to everyone, because even people not my age can still be intimidated by joining boards. I think my message would be that, most of the things I've achieved today, I was scared before I took that step, scared before I did anything. If you want to forever retreat to a zone of being comfortable, you will never see greater heights. You'll never see what really your potential could be. So I think that you have to change your mindset, and you have to entertain a new paradigm, a paradigm of being willing to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. And there's a lot of benefit you can get from being on the board of a charity, as well as being able to contribute to the strategic direction of the organization, small ones, larger ones. You're able to impact society and your community in a different way. It's different from, say, volunteering once per week for a charity initiative. Board meetings don't happen so often, and you can somewhat decide how much. I mean, there is a baseline level of involvement you can have, but you can decide to do a bit more or do a bit less, etc. And as well as being able to give, there's a lot you can learn from being on a board and from seeing things from a more strategic level as opposed to the grassroots level with charities.
Great, wonderful. I think it's a great segue to now talk about your book, A Power of a Dream, Seven Steps to Ignite Your Dreams. Talk to me about what inspired you to write that book. I mean, every time you speak is very inspiring, but something made you think, right, I need to document this and share this. So talk to us a little bit about that.
I think I've always had the desire to, or at least from the age of 17, I had the
Okay.
desire to write a book. But it's something you just sit on. I remember during COVID, actually, I had a bit of time off before starting my first job as a junior doctor. And I tried to start writing the book, but I couldn't get past, I think, like 4,000 words. And I was like, I just don't know what to write because
Mhm.
at first my idea was let me write an autobiography. Then I quickly realized that after becoming 18 or like secondary school, there's not that much to talk
Sure.
about because I haven't lived for that long. But my sister wrote a book actually. Her book is How to Save £10,000 on a Low Income. And I was really inspired by that. And my sister, she's, as I said, she's like one of my role models, of one of my inspirations. And she said, you need to write your book. And I was putting it off, and she was like, just do it. And then she connected me to her book coach. I had a conversation with him, and I thought, I'm just going to do this. And, having a book coach helped to give me a structure, the 7 steps, and then that helped me to write the book. So the first part is a biography, and then the latter part is actually 7 steps. And because I'm all about like pursuing your dreams and overcoming fear, that kind of helped me to come up with that title. And then I just shared my journey and then changed my journey into practical steps because I knew there was a lot that people could learn from my journey and how I navigated and kind of achieved some of the things that I have.
Amazing. Um, Final question as we bring this great session to a close. I want you to think about the future, and I want to talk about 5 years time. And I use a 5 years because that's a political cycle, right? We just got
Yeah.
a new Labour government at the moment. And now think about the work you do and also where the NHS is going. What do you foresee for the NHS for the next 5 years? And finally, as part of your answer, just think about the kind of message you want to land on for our listeners on this particular podcast.
Yeah. I think everybody knows that the NHS is in a really challenged position at the moment. So I don't think any of us know 100% where the NHS will be in 5 years'
You're
time. What we do know is that, some radical changes need to take place if the NHS is to keep standing, and if it's able to, for it to be able to function in a constructive kind of way. Um, I think the message that I would want to get across, because with lots of the challenges that are going on in the NHS, it's not something that any one individual can kind of deal with. And I don't think any one person has all of the solutions. But I think the message that I would want to get across, especially if there are any young people listening to this who are thinking about a career in the NHS or a career as a doctor, I would say, if that's genuinely what you want to do, go for it. Sometimes we maybe enter into a system or a situation that is challenged, but you can actually be a part of the change. You can be a part of contributing and transforming that system. So try to go in with that mentality, and rather than maybe feeling discouraged or nervous about what the future may look like. That's if it's something you're truly passionate about and want to do.
Leanne, it's been great spending time with you on this episode of Med Talks, and hopefully we can come back to you in the future just to see how you're getting on with your trust work and also your medical career. Thank you very much.
Thank you.